The most dangerous competition of our century isn't happening on battlefields, it's unfolding in factories, financial systems, and technological labs across the globe. While the world watches for military tensions, China has been executing a strategic playbook that ancient philosophers perfected thousands of years ago, winning without fighting. In 500 BC, the Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without battle." Today, that principle isn't just philosophy. It's China's operational blueprint for becoming the world's dominant superpower by 2049, the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic. But how exactly does a nation achieve global dominance without firing a shot? The answer lies in 5 interconnected strategic moves that are reshaping the international order right now, in ways most people don't even notice. Let's start with the foundation: manufacturing supremacy. While many countries outsourced their production capabilities over the past 4 decades, China did the opposite. They became the irreplaceable manufacturer for the entire planet. Today, China produces 28% of all global manufacturing output, 50% of the world's steel, 60% of the world's cement, over 70% of the world's smartphones, and nearly 80% of global solar panels. But here's what makes this strategic rather than just economic dependency creation. When every major economy relies on Chinese manufacturing, Beijing gains leverage without needing military threats. During the COVID-19 pandemic, this became crystal clear when global supply chains collapsed and nations realized that critical goods, from medical equipment to electronics, all had a single point of origin: China. The educational insight here is understanding the concept of structural power in international relations. Unlike military power, which requires constant demonstration and maintenance, structural power comes from controlling systems that others depend on. China doesn't need to threaten, they just need to be essential. Consider this: in 2023, when the Philippines had territorial disputes with China in the South China Sea, Beijing didn't deploy warships as the primary response. Instead, they quietly reminded Manila that 30% of Philippine imports come from China, and that Chinese tourists, a major revenue source, could be redirected elsewhere. The dispute cooled without a single shot fired. The second strategic move is even more sophisticated: technological encirclement through the Belt and Road Initiative's digital component. While Western nations debate 5G security, China has already installed telecommunications infrastructure in over 100 countries. Huawei and ZTE equipment now powers cellular networks across Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and parts of Europe. But this isn't just about selling routers and cell towers, it's about creating technological dependence for the next 50 years. Here's the strategic calculation: if your country's internet infrastructure runs on Chinese technology, 3 things happen. First, you're locked into Chinese standards and protocols, making it expensive to switch later, similar to how difficult it is for iPhone users to switch to Android after years of ecosystem integration. Second, Beijing gains insights into data flows and communication patterns, which, while controversial, provides strategic intelligence advantages. Third, and most importantly, China becomes the preferred partner for future technological upgrades: artificial intelligence systems, smart city infrastructure, and digital currency platforms. The educational principle at work is path dependency. Early infrastructure choices create trajectories that are difficult and costly to reverse. China understands this deeply, which is why they're willing to offer favorable financing terms for countries to adopt their technology now, knowing it creates decades of relationship lock-in. Take Kenya's Standard Gauge Railway, built by Chinese firms and funded by Chinese loans. It's not just a railway, it's a complete transportation system that requires Chinese spare parts, Chinese training, and Chinese technical support for its entire operational lifetime. Kenya didn't just buy a railway, they bought into a 30-year relationship with Chinese supply chains. Perhaps the most sophisticated move is happening in global finance, where China is methodically undermining the US dollar's dominance, not through dramatic announcements, but through patient, strategic alternatives. Since the 1940s, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency, giving America what former French Finance Minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing called exorbitant privilege: the ability to print money that other countries need to hold. But China is building parallel systems that slowly erode this advantage. The Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, or CIPS, is China's alternative to SWFT, the Western-controlled financial messaging system. Launched in 2015, CIPS now processes trillions in transactions annually, primarily in yuan. When Russia faced SWFT sanctions in 2022, they had CIPS as a backup, a strategic cushion China intentionally created. The digital yuan represents an even more fundamental shift. Unlike cryptocurrencies, China's central bank digital currency is state-controlled and designed for international trade. Countries in Africa and Southeast Asia are already piloting cross-border payments using digital yuan, bypassing dollars entirely. But here's the strategic genius: China isn't demanding countries abandon the dollar. They're simply offering convenient alternatives, allowing natural economic incentives to gradually shift behavior. It's the financial equivalent of building a new highway next to an old one. Eventually, traffic naturally migrates to the better route. The educational concept here is gradual displacement. Revolutionary changes often face resistance, but evolutionary changes accumulate until they reach a tipping point. China's approach recognizes that currency dominance is a long game measured in decades, not years. Brazil and China recently began settling bilateral trade in their own currencies, eliminating dollars from transactions worth over 150 billion annually. Multiply that across dozens of countries and you see the dollar's global share slowly eroding, not through dramatic collapse, but through steady substitution. These first three moves, manufacturing dominance, technological infrastructure, and financial alternatives, form the foundation of China's strategy. But the most sophisticated elements involve reshaping international institutions and creating new security architectures that don't rely on American frameworks. When the United States and its allies created the post-World War II order, the United Nations, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and World Trade Organization, they embedded Western values in voting structures. China participated in these systems while simultaneously building alternatives. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIB, launched in 2016, now has 109 member countries, including traditional U.S. allies like the United Kingdom, Germany, and Australia. With over 100 billion in capital, AIB funds infrastructure projects across Asia, often with fewer conditions than World Bank loans. The strategic significance AIB doesn't challenge the World Bank directly, it simply offers an alternative. Countries can choose which lender offers better terms. Over time, this erodes the World Bank's monopoly on development financing, reducing American leverage in international development. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, operates similarly in security affairs. Founded in 2001, it now includes Russia, India, Pakistan, Iran, and Central Asian states, covering nearly half the world's population. While not a formal military alliance like NATO, SCO conducts joint military exercises, intelligence sharing, and counter-terrorism cooperation, creating security relationships that bypass American frameworks. The educational principle is institutional pluralism. Rather than overthrowing existing systems, China builds parallel structures that gradually attract participation, creating a multipolar institutional landscape where American-led organizations are options, not requirements. Consider voting power in the IMF. The United States holds 16.5% of votes, enough to veto major decisions. In AIB, voting is based on economic size, giving China natural influence as Asia's largest economy. By creating institutions with different rules, China reshapes what legitimate governance looks like. The final and perhaps most powerful strategic move isn't about resources or institutions, it's about temporal thinking. While democracies operate on election cycles of 2-4 years, China's political system plans in decades and generations. This creates a fundamental asymmetry in strategic competition. Consider infrastructure investments. The Belt and Road Initiative won't show full returns for 30-40 years, but China committed 1 trillion knowing that current leaders won't be around to claim credit. Democratic leaders struggle to justify projects with payoffs beyond their terms in office. Historical parallel. When Deng initiated economic reforms in 1978, he told officials, "Cross the river by feeling the stones," a metaphor for gradual progress. 47 years later, that patient approach transformed China from an impoverished nation to the world's second largest economy. The educational concept is strategic patience versus tactical urgency. Western competitive culture emphasizes quarterly earnings, annual budgets, and election cycle deliverables. Chinese strategic culture emphasizes positional advantage over immediate gains. In the South China Sea, this patience is evident. Rather than seizing islands through military invasion, China spent a decade gradually building artificial islands, installing civilian infrastructure, then casually adding military capabilities. By the time international attention focused on the issue, the islands were irreversible facts, concrete and steel not easily removed. Sun Tzu wrote, "Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win." China's approach embodies this: create conditions for inevitable success, then act when resistance is futile. When these 5 moves work together, they create a system of power that's more resilient than military dominance. Manufacturing dependency makes economic decoupling painful for other nations. Technological infrastructure creates 30-year relationship lock-ins. Financial alternatives gradually reduce dollar reliance. Parallel institutions offer choices that fragment Western-led governance. Strategic patience allows China to outlast short-term reactive policies. The genius is that each element reinforces the others. A country using CIPES for payments is more likely to join AIB for financing, making them more receptive to Chinese technology standards, which increases manufacturing orders, which funds more Belt and Road projects, creating a self-reinforcing ecosystem. This is systemic competition, not battlefield confrontation. The outcome isn't determined by who has more aircraft carriers, but by whose economic model, governance system, and international partnerships prove more attractive and sustainable over decades. But this strategy isn't invincible. 3 significant vulnerabilities exist. First, demographic collapse. China's population peaked in 2022 and is now declining rapidly. By 2050, China will have more retirees than workers, a historically unprecedented burden. Economic growth requires either productivity miracles or younger populations, and China's facing the opposite trend. Second, debt sustainability. Belt and Road projects have created debt traps in countries like Sri Lanka and Zambia, generating international backlash. The more visible China's influence becomes, the more resistance builds. Nationalism is a powerful counter force. Third, innovation bottlenecks. While China excels at manufacturing and incremental improvement, Breakthrough innovation still concentrates in the United States and Europe. Semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and artificial intelligence leadership remain Western-dominated, creating technological chokepoints China hasn't yet overcome. The educational lesson: no strategy is perfect. Overextension, internal challenges, and external resistance all create friction. The question isn't whether China's strategy is flawless, it's whether competitors can exploit these vulnerabilities faster than China can adapt. Ray Dalio's big cycle theory suggests that rising powers don't need to defeat declining powers militarily. They simply need to outlast them while building superior systems. History shows that empires typically collapse from internal dysfunction before external threats finish them. The United States faces a choice: recognize this systemic competition and adapt its long-term strategy, or continue focusing on short-term tactical responses while structural shifts continue beneath the surface. For the rest of the world, the shift creates options. Countries no longer face a binary choice between American and Chinese spheres. They can navigate between both, extracting benefits from each. This multipolar reality may actually reduce the risk of direct great power conflict, since neither China nor the United States can afford to lose partners to the other side. The ultimate irony: by pursuing victory without fighting, China may inadvertently create a more balanced international system where power is distributed and competition is economic rather than military. Whether that's better for human flourishing than American unipolar dominance is the question that will define the 21st century. As Sun Tzu would observe, the greatest victory is the one where your opponent never realized they were a battle until it was already over.